Engine 21 respond to a residential fire, possible entrapment, 3200 block Woodland Drive NW. It's 1:24 p.m. on Thursday, May 14, 2015. In the heart of Washington, D.C.'s wealthy Woodley Park neighborhood, smoke curls into the spring air from a sprawling multi-million-dollar mansion. From the outside, it looks like a bad house fire, but what firefighters will find inside is something darker, something unimaginable. If you want more real crime stories like this one, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next case. When the flames are doused, the silence inside is deafening. 4 bodies, the family's patriarch, his wife, their 10-year-old son, and the woman who worked in their home. They're bound, brutally killed, and in the basement a smell of accelerant still lingers in the air. At first glance, it could have been a robbery gone wrong, but as investigators begin to piece together what happened inside that house over the previous 19 hours, they uncover a story that will shake the Capitol and spark one of the most high-profile manhunts D.C. has ever seen. Woodley Park isn't just any neighborhood. It's a pocket of Washington where political leaders, diplomats, and high-profile executives live behind manicured hedges and private gates. Security is an afterthought. Crime feels like it belongs on the other side of the river. The home at 3201 Woodland Drive belonged to Savas Philip Savopoulos, a 46-year-old business leader who ran American Iron Works, a prominent construction company known for its work on some of DC's biggest projects. He lived here with his wife, Amy Claire Martin Savopoulos, 47, their bright and athletic son, Philip, and, when she stayed over, their longtime housekeeper, Felicia Avira Figueroa, 57. Their 2 older daughters, Abigail and Katerina, were away at boarding school. That fact, as investigators would later realize, might have saved their lives. But firefighters enter. The blaze seems oddly localized. It hasn't consumed the entire mansion, but the damage is devastating in the kitchen and nearby room. It's in the middle of that destruction that they find the victims, duct-taped, burned and badly injured. One more thing stands out. In the kitchen trash, a Domino's pizza box. Inside, a single half-eaten slice. It will turn out to be the most important piece of evidence in the case. Within hours, DC police realize they're not dealing with a random burglary. This was targeted, controlled. Someone had taken their time. Hours, possibly an entire day. Inside the Savopoulos home, security cameras from nearby streets show nothing unusual. No frantic neighbors calling 900 and no sign of forced entry that would explain the attack. Whoever was inside that home was either invited in or had the power to make everyone obey. And while the house burned, a black Porsche belonging to the family sped away, later found abandoned and on fire in Maryland. As news breaks, Washington reels. A quadruple homicide in one of the safest enclaves of the capital is unthinkable. Media trucks line the street, while police cordon off the mansion. Reporters push for details, but investigators remain tight-lipped. What they will confirm is chilling. The victims were restrained with duct tape. They had suffered blunt force trauma, and the young boy, Philip, had also been stabbed before the fire was set. In the hours before the blaze, something else had happened. Something that would give the killer what he wanted and seal the victim's fate. On the morning of May 14, $40,000 in cash was delivered to the Savopoulos home. Why would a killer hold a prominent family hostage for nearly 19 hours? Why would they kill everyone, even the housekeeper, and set fire to the evidence after getting the money? And more urgently, who could have done this without drawing attention in a neighborhood full of eyes? The answer would begin with that single slice of pizza, trace of saliva, and a name investigators knew from the past. It was just a smudge of DNA on a pizza crust. But when the lab results came back, detectives froze. They'd seen this name before, and he had a direct connection to the family. Before the fire, before the ransom, before the name Darren Wint would appear on every news broadcast in America, there was just a family. A close-knit household living a life of comfort, achievement, and quiet privilege in the heart of Washington, D.C. Savas wasn't just another name on a company letterhead. At 46, he was the CEO and president of American Iron Works, a high-profile construction firm that had helped shape the skyline of D.C. and beyond. Bridges, arenas, and luxury high-rises bore the signature of his company's work. Colleagues described him as a man who commanded respect but avoided arrogance. He was meticulous, a perfectionist, The kind of executive who remembered the names of the welders on his job sites as easily as he remembered the details of a multi-million-dollar contract. He had worked for years to grow the family business into a powerhouse, and now he was enjoying the rewards. A beautiful home in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, a loving marriage, and 3 children who seemed poised to have every opportunity in life. Amy, 47, had a warm, magnetic personality that balanced her husband's disciplined demeanor. She was a devoted mother who was just as comfortable at a black tie charity gala as she was cheering from the sidelines at her children's sports games. She had an artistic eye, a love of decorating and design, and a deep commitment to making her home a welcoming space. Friends often described the Savopoulos residence as always open, a place where children played freely and guests felt like family. Behind that grace was a quiet strength. She managed the home's busy schedule, handled charity work, and supported her husband's demanding career, all while keeping her focus on her children's happiness and education. At just 10 years old, Philip Savopoulos was already showing signs of his father's determination and his mother's charm. He had an infectious smile and a boundless energy that made him the center of attention in any room. Philip had recently discovered a passion for go-kart racing. The family even supported his budding interest by helping him participate in junior racing events. For him, the thrill wasn't just about winning. It was about the speed, the control, the sense of freedom behind the wheel. In the days before the tragedy, he'd been excited about an upcoming race weekend. His go-kart was ready. His gear was packed. His life was filled with the kinds of plans 10-year-olds dream about. To outsiders, Vera was the Savopoulos family's housekeeper. But in reality, she was much more. A trusted friend, a confidante, and someone the children adored. At 57, she had spent decades working in the US after emigrating from El Salvador. She was known for her tireless work ethic, her generosity, and her deep loyalty to the family she served. Vera often stayed overnight if her duties ran late, especially when the family needed extra help with events or travel. She had her own family, including a daughter, and she was proud of the life she'd built. She was careful, responsible, and always alert, qualities that would later make investigators wonder how an intruder could have overpowered her without raising an alarm. The Savopoulos home was a fortress in its own right, an expansive property with multiple floors, high-end security features, and a location that felt insulated from danger. Neighbors rarely worried about crime. Their biggest concerns were home renovations and parking. But sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from a stranger on the street. Sometimes it comes from a familiar face. On May 13, 2015, life at 3201 Woodland Drive seemed normal, at least from the outside. Savas was juggling business calls. Amy was in touch with friends and staff. Philip had school. Vera was handling her regular duties. By evening, no one could have guessed that the next 19 hours would be a living nightmare, a hostage situation that would unravel in slow, deliberate horror. And somewhere out there, a man with a personal link to Savas's company was already in motion. By the time the sun rose on May 14, the family was no longer in control of their own home. And the reason was a single chilling truth: their captor had no intention of letting them live. Imagine the quiet hum of a neighborhood winding down for the night. Street lamps glow over perfectly trimmed hedges. Inside the Savopoulos home, lights are still on. But what's happening behind those walls isn't the comfortable end to a normal day. It's the beginning of a nightmare. Somewhere between late afternoon and evening, an intruder gains control of the household. Exactly how is still debated. Was it a forced entry through an unlocked door, or did the captor have a way to get inside without breaking in? What is certain is this: by nightfall, Savas, Amy, Philip, and Vera were all restrained with duct tape. The attack is methodical. This isn't chaos, it's control. Duct tape binds wrists and ankles. Mouths are gagged. The captor isn't in a rush. He's settling in. Neighbors notice nothing unusual. No screams, no sounds of struggle. The Savopoulos home remains outwardly calm. Inside, the captor demands something: money, a large sum. As the hours pass, the victims are kept alive, their very presence serving as leverage. They're threatened, possibly beaten, and likely told that if they cooperate, they will survive. The next morning, events move with chilling precision. At 9:00 a.m., Savas contacts one of his trusted assistants, Jordan Wallace. He instructs Wallace to withdraw $40,000 in cash from the company. The money is to be delivered to the house, no questions asked. Wallace, thinking this is urgent but legitimate, complies. He stops at a bank, retrieves the cash, and delivers it in a manila envelope. Surveillance cameras show him leaving it inside a car in the driveway, just as instructed. This step is crucial. Investigators will later piece together that the captor allowed the victims to live until the ransom was secured. At some point during the hostage period, 2 pizzas from Domino's are delivered to the home. The order is placed under the name of Savas. The driver leaves the pizzas on the porch. When the captor eats a slice, he leaves behind a small but damning clue: saliva on the crust. In the moment, it's meaningless. Later, it will break the case open. Once the ransom is in hand, the captor's purpose changes. He no longer needs his hostages alive. Sometime between late morning and early afternoon, the violence escalates. The victims suffer blunt force trauma, possibly from a baseball bat found later in the home. Philip, the youngest, is also stabbed. Vera, loyal to the end, is found close to the others, showing signs she may have tried to protect the family. Accelerant is poured in parts of the house. Flames are set, spreading quickly but not enough to destroy the entire structure before help arrives. As the fire takes hold, the captor leaves, driving away in the family's Porsche 911. Witnesses later see the sports car speeding through traffic toward Maryland. The car is found torched in a church parking lot in Prince George's County, Maryland, not far from where the suspect once lived. It's a final attempt to erase evidence, but much like the pizza crust, traces of the truth will remain. Firefighters arrive at the mansion expecting a rescue. Instead, they find the bodies. DC police are called, and the crime scene becomes one of the most complex and disturbing in the city's history. The timeline from the moment the victims were first restrained to the burning Porsche spans roughly 19 hours. It's long enough for someone to get exactly what they wanted, and cruel enough to ensure no one inside would survive to tell the story. The Savopoulos mansion is now both a crime scene and a puzzle. Ash still hangs in the air. Detectives step carefully through the charred rooms, their eyes scanning for anything the fire didn't destroy. Among the debris, investigators find objects the flames failed to consume: partially burned duct tape, melted plastic, the mangled remains of a baseball bat. But the most intriguing find is in the kitchen. The discarded Domino's pizza box. 2 half-eaten slices remain. The crust is still intact. Detectives bag them for evidence. At this point, they don't know if the pizza was ordered by the victims under duress or by the suspect himself. The pizza box is sent to the lab, and within days, the results come back. On one slice, a trace of saliva. The DNA profile matches a man already in the national database: Darren Dylan Wint. Wint is a 34-year-old former welder who once worked for American Iron Works, the Savopoulos family's business. His employment there was brief, ending years earlier. But that small connection is enough to suggest how he might have known of Savas's wealth and perhaps how to get inside the home without immediate suspicion. Wint was born in Guyana and immigrated to the United States as a teenager. By his 30s, his record included arrests for assault, harassment, and other charges, some dismissed, some resulting in convictions. He was known to have a temper and a tendency toward intimidation. After leaving American Iron Works, he drifted between jobs. Friends described him as unpredictable. The police now saw him as dangerous and very possibly armed, and on May 21, 2015, a week after the murders, police publicly name Wint as the suspect. His face floods every local news broadcast. The FBI and U.S. Marshals join the search. That same day, officers spot Wint in Brooklyn, New York. But this isn't a quiet arrest. Wint is traveling in a convoy of cars surrounded by others. Inside the vehicles are thousands in cash, a stack of money orders, and weapons. Wint is taken into custody without a shootout, but the scene raises more questions than answers. If he acted alone in the mansion, why was he now in the company of multiple people? And where did the cash come from? Investigators trace the $40,000 ransom. Most of it is gone. Wint claims he was framed, that others were involved, and that he never killed anyone. But he cannot explain why his DNA was on the pizza crust inside the home during the exact hours of the hostage situation. Surveillance footage, phone records, and witness statements suggest that more than one person might have been involved in holding the victims, yet no one else is charged. Prosecutors focus on Wint as the sole defendant, arguing that whether or not others were present, he was the one who committed the murders. In addition to the DNA, investigators present a chain of circumstantial evidence, cell tower records placing Wint near the mansion. His sudden access to large amounts of cash, the burned Porsche linked to his movements, witnesses who say they saw him near the house before the fire to detectives. The narrative is clear. Wint held the family and Vera hostage, extorted the ransom, killed them, and fled. With the arrest making headlines, prosecutors prepare for one of the most high-profile trials in DC history. But when the case reaches the courtroom, Wint's defense will hinge on one claim that he wasn't the only one inside that mansion. The courtroom is packed. Reporters line the benches, sketch artists fill their pads, and the families of the victims sit together in quiet grief. It has been more than 3 years since the fire on Woodland Drive, and now the man accused of turning that home into a house of horrors is about to face a jury. The prosecution's message to jurors is simple. Darren Wint acted with premeditation, control, and brutality. They present the crime as a calculated scheme, a man with a grudge against his former employer, motivated by greed, who was willing to kill to get what he wanted. The defense, in contrast, paints a different picture. They don't deny Wint's DNA is on the pizza crust, but they argue it proves only that he was present, not that he committed the murders. Wint's lawyers float the idea of other, unidentified accomplices as the true killers, suggesting Wint was manipulated or coerced into being at the house. The prosecution builds its case piece by piece, DNA on the pizza crust linking Wint directly to the scene during the hostage period, cell phone records placing Wint's device in the vicinity of the mansion, the $40,000 ransom partially recovered from Wint's associates. Witness testimony, including that of Jordan Wallace, the assistant who delivered the money, forensics, burned items from the Porsche and the home tying back to Wint. The government's narrative is unrelenting. Even if others were present, Wint was the central figure, the one who orchestrated and executed the plan. Wallace becomes a key witness for the prosecution. He recounts the unusual request from Summers to deliver the $40,000 and the specific instructions to leave the envelope in a car, details that fit perfectly with the timeline of the murders. Under cross-examination, the defense tries to poke holes, hinting at Wallace's possible deeper involvement. But prosecutors remind the jury, Wallace's cooperation began immediately after the crime, and no physical evidence ties him to the killings. Wint does not take the stand in his own defense. His attorneys focus instead on raising reasonable doubt, emphasizing the absence of eyewitnesses to the actual murders and the possibility of multiple perpetrators. But the lack of any alternative suspect, combined with the forensic evidence, begins to weigh heavily against him. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returns. The courtroom is silent as the clerk reads the verdict. Guilty on 20 counts, including multiple counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, extortion, burglary, and arson. Wint shows little reaction as the words are read. For the victims' families, it's a moment of relief, but not closure. The questions about possible accomplices will never fully go away. Judge Juliet McKenna sentences Wint to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of release. She calls the crimes heinous, cold-blooded, calculated, deliberate, and heartless. In that moment, Wint's fate is sealed, but his legal journey isn't quite over. Appeals will follow, though none will succeed. With the trial over and Wint behind bars, the city tried to move on. But for the families and for a public still haunted by the brutality, the question lingered. Was justice complete, or was part of the truth still out there? When the verdict came down in 2018, many thought the story was over. Darren Wint was sentenced to die in prison, the families had their day in court, and the city could close one of its darkest chapters. But time has a way of leaving shadows, and in this case, the shadows never fully lifted. Wint's legal team immediately began working on appeals, repeating the same refrain they'd used during the trial, that he was not the only person involved, and that he was being unfairly painted as the sole killer. In 2022, the DC Court of Appeals reviewed his case. After examining the evidence, they upheld his convictions and denied a new trial. The judges were blunt. The DNA, the ransom trail, and the totality of the evidence left no reasonable doubt of Wint's guilt. Even with Wint behind bars, one lingering mystery remains. Was he truly the only person inside the mansion? The evidence suggested the possibility of accomplices, from the logistics of holding 4 people hostage for 19 hours to the convoy of cars at his arrest to the movement of the ransom money. But no one else has ever been charged. For the Savepalos and Figueroa families, that uncertainty is a wound that never fully heals. Justice was served for one man, but perhaps not for all who were responsible. Amy and Savas's 2 daughters, Abigail and Katerina, lost their parents and brother in a single day. Vera's family lost the woman who had been their provider, protector, and matriarch. By May 2025, the case had reached its 10th anniversary. Local news revisited the story, airing archival footage of the fire and the trial. Commentators noted that the crime had changed the way many in Washington viewed security, even in the wealthiest enclaves. What struck viewers most was how quickly the violence unfolded, and how, despite the neighborhood's prestige, the victims were just as vulnerable as anyone else when evil made its way to their door. For investigators, the D.C. mansion murders became a textbook case in modern forensics. How a trace of DNA on something as ordinary as a pizza crust could crack open a homicide investigation. For the public, it's a chilling reminder that danger can come from someone you've known, someone you've trusted, even someone you once employed. And for true crime followers, it's a story that raises unsettling questions about whether all the culprits truly faced justice. As of August 2025, Darren Wint remains incarcerated, serving life without the possibility of release. There have been no new arrests connected to the case. The investigation into possible accomplices is, at least publicly, silent. Do you think justice was truly served here? Or is part of the story still hiding in the shadows? Tell us what you think in the comments.